And it says recording.
Okay,
So we are there. What we don't see is any image of you, Susan.
No, I don't do images. It's distracting.
Okay. Then it is now 6:01. I would like to call the Conservation Committee meeting to order. And I will begin with a quick roll call. Present, John Fusick, Chris Schipper, Linda Andros, and Silvio, and our guest on in-house is Tiger Man, and by Zoom, Susan Schweitzer. I can't tell if there are any other participants at this point, but let's see who the second one is. Oh, that's us. Okay, we're all set. Thank you for coming. Let's quickly address the minutes from January and February. Do I have a motion to approve?
I just have one observation on the minutes for for February 9th. I'm sure this was a cut and paste thing that you were cut and paste saying you weren't here. But Susan, you have that Chris thanked Marty McLaughlin for his service, which was from the previous minute.
Right, strike that.
But that's all.
That's it. Okay. Any other observations on the any other points regarding the minutes? Then I move to approve the minutes.
I second.
Excellent. All in favor?
All in favor.
Minutes approved. Thank you very much. Thank you, Susan. Okay. Without Robin, we're not going to discuss the sustainable New Canaan Silver certification update. Perfect timing. Linda, can you tell us what the expenses are expected for the river testing and the Bristow testing for this
Yeah.
coming year?
And it has to be changed to 2023.
Right.
So it's, the river testing is 3,500 as it's been for the last few years. For the nutrients testing, it's 3,785, which is more than it was previously. In the proposal that Nikki Spiller sent us, it detailed as to why it's materials.
Got it.
They also needed to have more staff to supervise.
Got it. Okay, so that's 7,200 encumbered in the budget.
And,
All right.
and we want to try to get it in this year.
Yes, I would like to.
So, Tiger, on that, I remember last year you wanted the invoices in a certain way, and
Yeah, we need an estimate first.
an estimate first.
An estimate, then, yeah, it's under 10,000.
It's under
So
10,000.
then we get the first selectman to sign it, because that's part of the policy, and then we'll get a PO, and I'll get Christie to write you a PO, and then when the invoices roll in.
Got it. So,
I'll send you that. I'll send you an email with that as
Yeah.
that amount on it, and then
It's
we
perfect.
should break it into two estimates, or break it into two is one. Total 7,285.
One estimate is fine.
Okay.
And it's gonna come out of the same account, we only have really one account, so it's out of the same account, and then we just track what they're doing as far as their work. and it should be
Okay.
perfect.
okay, perfect.
Excellent. And I believe that on the Green Link, the Bristow pull-up and sidewalk construction timetable was well addressed. Or there's anything else to say about that? Again, it was picked up in the newspaper to generate some questions.
Right, I got an answer back, preliminary answer back, on the DOT today. They have some questions about, whether or not we're actually gonna have to have a lease of the area, because it's their area for a parking area, and then whether a maintenance agreement would be necessary. They're checking. I said that the town was already anticipating maintaining the area, that we weren't asking for the state for that. They'll still want a maintenance agreement, obviously, since it's in the right of way, but just to allay their fears, they said, no, we were already considering it. And then we did ask whether or not they would be amenable to a porous pavement. And the statement that we got back was, well, if the town is considering maintenance thereof, then they would necessarily consider, they would consider the porous pavement. It wasn't a yes, but they have to go back to their rights of way people right now to make sure about the use of the land.
Got it.
And our our feeling is that we've been utilizing, I mean, I pulled off that in 1999, to talk to Susan.
Cars
Levy.
parked there in the fifties.
Yeah, I mean, so my feeling is that it's almost a prescribed easement, right? We've been using it for forever for parking cars. We just want to make it more available.
And we already do a pull-on, pull-off down by the pump station further up the road.
Correct, which which is an interesting one because we never had to do anything for that. I think they consider that to be a driveway, but it is what it is, but you're right, that we are pulling off and parking. And we are very close to the right of way for some of what we've got there.
Sure.
I don't anticipate it being a problem, to be pronounced yet. I think more of their concerns would be around traffic. That's what we were feeling, right? But being that it's a pull off and then a pull on
Right.
versus parking adjacent to the roadway. Adjacent to the roadway, they're not gonna allow.
Correct.
And then anything that requires you to back out into the roadway, they're not gonna allow. If we had full-in parking, what we designed, I think that they'll be fine.
Excellent.
So that's, but we'll wait for, we have a couple of hoops left, but now that we're in a dialogue, we're much better off.
And the funding for this?
Funding for this will come out of a sidewalks account and parking lot account, so a combination thereof. So we have a meeting tonight to finalize those budgets.
What would they normally prescribe as the surface?
They would want asphalt because of maintenance. If it was there, they'd want asphalt.
Right.
They would want as easy as maintenance as possible. So we're looking at for the porous pavement, we necessarily have to go in and sweep it, we might have to vacuum sweep it, we have some things that have to occur to make sure that the fines in the porous pavement stay open. So you have to sweep it regularly, which we do anyways, for most of the areas in the downtown. And then if we had to get a vacuum sweeper, figure out how we would do that, we could do that, we could pressure wash it. There's other ways to get the fines open, we can pressure wash it, things of that nature, so we're looking at that.
And of course, the Conservation Commission loves porous.
Yeah.
Because it's next to wetlands.
Right.
Better, it's better in general, and it's also better for the big oak that's still further up.
Right, our Maria, right, she spent 22
So you're
years.
an expert in the forest.
We spent 22 years on the private side doing exactly this, land use development, stormwater management, so this is right in her wheelhouse. And she's much, we've already been looking at areas to do forest pavement up at Irwin, the parking lot coming in up there. We had originally thought we might be able to do the larger lot at Wavy, but it was too cost prohibitive to do that large lot where the rink was.
Yeah.
But we are looking at other areas where we can, and this is a nice little one that we can.
We like it, we like it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's exciting, that we're in play for that, and that's gonna be in the line, and we recognize that there's still a challenge of whether the sidewalk can make it all the way up, but. We're pushing towards that big 2024, centennial, September 8th, 2024.
Yeah, the survey was done it's almost done. We have a meeting with the surveyor just to go. What normally happens is he surveys it, and then we walk the entire route to make sure that we didn't miss anything in the survey, and that everything is well documented, well established. So we have a meeting with him next week to walk the route, walk the survey route. And at that point in time, he'll start the design, but that's our normal mode, is to survey an area and then walk it and then literally, and look and make sure that everything we see is on the paper. That way, when he goes to design it, there's no surprises.
We are grateful that this is in your able hands.
So thank you.
So if you reach your-
Every 15 minutes, pretty sure. That's very encouraging. I believe the next item is item 4. Bristow Bird and Wildlife Preserve. We now have a capital budget entry. I think you guys might have seen the annual spending and capital plan in the newspaper printed, but we were standing there at the 97.5 level, which would be the final plan. And Keith Simpson Associates, who are the master planners, have been working through issues and gathering ideas for this. And I would say that there is some serious work to be done in there for trail work, but this is going to also include some of the planting and invasive management, where we're going to take a run at 1 or 2 areas to really improve the natural quality of the park, or work towards improving the natural quality. I don't know if anyone's had a chance to take a look at the new pavilion that just went out.
Well, your picture was great.
Picture, I saw the picture. It's all set now for the cedar shingles. And I assume that they just have to get brought in there and somebody has to hammer them in.
Yeah, Keith Simpson, I talked to Bill Paul about him. He's already, when the pavilion was coming in, he had already been speaking to the
Got it.
carpenter about the shingles and about the roof, so they're already, he's aware.
It's in plan,
It's in plan.
it'll be done, but it'll really be it's a beautiful structure.
Right.
And I hope that it becomes the gathering place for people to sit and chat, but also a potential classroom for students. You know, our goal eventually is we're so close to the schools that we'd love to have classrooms come, learn about birds, learn about nature, learn about the park, and experience that, get that impression, do that imprinting. Mead Park walkway to Bristol Park entrance. I believe that there's a plan almost developed for that.
Very close, yeah, so they actually came to me with a preliminary design. We looked at it, as far as, getting to Bristol, getting down from Mead down to baseball field and then up the
Yep.
hill. They wanted some additional survey of the area just to make sure that the grades would work, because we think that we might be able to make the grades work. That's a tough call,
I've got a blinding insight that was given to me by Joan Gazzetti, who walks with her husband. As you're aware, there is the path that climbs up the hill and
Mhm.
into the Bristol Park gate. But because we created a pathway that goes down along the stream bed, there is the possibility of a level path that goes behind the backstop, the
Mhm.
baseball backstop, and through a small gate onto that level path, which means from a senior accessibility or
Mhm.
handicap accessibility, you have a flatter run that requires much less movement, and
Right.
it wouldn't necessarily have to be the double wide. It would be wide enough for
Mhm.
two people, it could be 5 foot wide, and it could walk its way
Right.
through that without tree elimination and creating.
That was the biggest problem, is that they would have to relocate that trail.
Only bring that to your attention.
No, I appreciate it, 'cause I didn't think about that fact that we could go straight down. And
There
there
used
is,
to be a gate there, and I said,
Yeah.
seal it up.
right, and there's a little trail that leads up along the fence line, back up to the original gate, or to the new gate, so. Excuse me, I'll ask them to take a look at that, because that was one of my concerns. I was like, wow, that's a huge tree that we wanted to take down. I was a little concerned. So, like I said, we'll go back. I had some other questions elsewhere that they had to go back for, make sure that we were wide enough for my parks vehicles to maintain, since we come in there with a trailer and the truck. And so that where the embankment, where they're gonna protect the embankment, where that's all kind of washed away. So, yeah, I would call it a preliminary design, but we're at least we have a preliminary design, right? And I have monies right now, well, hopefully they'll be approved tonight from the Board of Finance level in the budget to handle that. So,
I think, and again, I'm not one to come in late.
no, it's all good.
Joan Gazzetti said, why don't you just do that?
No, it's
Because
a great idea.
that way we can still make that rise nice, or make it wide and workable. But for the people who don't want to climb that rise, they can just stay level, and then they come right out on the river trail, right on the street trail.
Right.
And I only brought that up on that.
No, I appreciate it. I'll talk to Keith and Bill about that.
There's a very minor point on that, David. I do think some signage that says, when you get to the gate, please come in.
Yeah,
Please open the gate and please close it behind you. Because it does look a little like, am I allowed in? And am I not? For a first time.
I hear you. And we also encountered the issue of gates being open, deer wandering in and out. And our goal is, I always wanted to have it kind of spring loaded, maybe like the Williamsburg kind of thing. We open the gate and then it just closes by itself. But you're right, which is welcome, please enter.
Yeah.
We have to, and I think it's a good thing, because the 23-24 plan includes better signage.
Right.
An improvement in the signage, and that's a good point.
Yeah.
Because I do think that the gates are beautiful.
Yeah.
But they're always askew, and it would be nicer if it said welcome, and then, you just push it, it just goes, comes back to point where a deer wouldn't decide to walk, push it open.
Does anybody know in this group, there, as you, up the existing path, to your right, towards the railroad tracks, there are some steps,
Yeah.
like a grand old house must have been up there before the railroad came through? I mean, I can't imagine what else.
No, we think it was through siding, we think that there was that kind of siding, we don't know, but we were, we wanted to basically. Just, we have another set of stairs just like that down further, but
Okay,
we were thinking about dismantling those and utilizing them elsewhere, because they are absolutely beautiful, and we were kind of lost
yeah,
in that right away.
so after, so there was maybe a side in there.
There was.
Yeah, we think there was a siding in
Okay.
there.
In the old pictures, like the 1870s, you'll see a couple places before they even came to the station.
Correct.
Where it could have been like a drop off, or there could have been a merchant there at one point before Bee Park got created. It probably
We think.
predates.
They are beautiful. They
Yeah,
are
yeah,
beautiful. We'd like to reutilize them, but right now they're just, you see them, you might see them as you walk in.
Yeah.
Sometimes you miss them, but they are, it is strange to see.
Usually, it's sort of like the train breaks down and this is where you disembark.
Right.
yeah, because I was incorrectly guessing that the free railroad needed.
No, I think it's there.
That would be kind of nice. Town.
Yeah, right. Tiger, exciting for that, and that's great, in terms of getting done for our, centennial. The future of Bristol Park Land Trust Public-Private Partnership. That is progressing, as I think you know, I'm ex officio on the Land Trust Board. And this has been a discussion back and forth. The Land Trust has asked to look at things like what's the public-private partnership agreement at Waveney or at Irwin, and how would we structure it? So they are looking at that. The good news about that is that whoever is Conservation Commission chair is ex officio on the Land Trust Board. And the other good thing is that for most of the life of Bristol Park, there was an advocacy group or two. When Bristol Park was founded, it was the Bird Protective Society, which was the Audubon Society. And when Bristol Park was founded, the Garden Club was the other advocacy group.
Right.
Both of those have one demise. The Garden Club has gone on to other things. The Land Trust seems like a good potential partner because it's not a recreation facility, it's a passive recreation. And it's basically a step up from other land trust properties, but it's not all the way to the Irwin or Waveney level of public park and activity. So it's meant to be birding and native plants and, quiet, so, sanctuary. That discussion is underway, and it may turn out that the Land Trust is the kind of advocacy and stewardship partner, and that would mean that there would be a group that could organize restocking bird feeders, that could be cleaning birdhouses, could do tree identification programs, the things that a land trust can organize. And it also means that there are more eyes on the park, so that if a tree comes down, somebody can say, oh, there's a tree down, contact Parks Department, and they'll organize it. And it also means it's a vehicle for them. They could also use it. They could raise funds to do more native planting or pollinator work or tree planting or what have you. So I'm encouraged by that. Now, it turns out I seem to be in all these different organizations, but this one could work.
So what is the next step? Does the board have to approve this?
I think their board has to review what would an agreement look like. Then the town has to, whereas the Conservation Commission intermediates, the town would have to look at it and say, where do the responsibilities lie in this field? And there are two facilitating aspects to it. One is the Land Trust holds 1.2 acres of land right adjoining the sanctuary. So they have this contribution of asset. And the other facilitating aspect is that the Friends of Briscoe are trying to organize a small endowment that they could then transfer, because the Friends of Briscoe is really an ad hoc organization done to create the centennial, to get the park up to the centennial. But at that point, it's ad hoc, so that it needs an organization to carry on. If that Friends of Bristol can deliver an endowment and we're thinking, it's not huge, it's maybe $100,000. But that would generate 5,000 a year towards bird seed or what have you. And it might be something that they can build onto as well,
Right.
which is where Irwin Park is held, because they have an endowment that is for the park. And the Wavy Park Conservancy is building up a kind of endowment. But Bristow will be one of these lower maintenance type of parks. It's not like, there's no resurfacing. There's occasionally spending a little gravel on trails, but it's a different, it's a different.
Yeah, the other benefit I see is just pure general awareness, right? They have a different, yeah, an overlapping reach, but a slightly different reach as well, right?
Yeah, they have Land Trust has a family donor base of 500 families, so it would certainly reach out. And that may also generate more support for Bristow in and of itself. So, and I will say, I did approach beautification, but they have really a lot on their plate. And the garden club has already got it, so it was kind of like, this is where we are.
Did you talk to the nature center?
We did have, and we do have a liaison with the Nature Center, and that we have, not the Land Trust, but the Friends of Bristow now have a liaison with the Nature Center with, through the person of Frank Gallo, who is their birding
Right,
expert.
right.
And he's advising Bristow and the planning for what goes on. That may continue.
Right, right, and that's something that we talked about last week, for you too.
Yeah.
Okay.
What
So
about
so it would be three.
What about downside to the partnership? Like
Yeah.
that? I mean,
I guess the downside would be, would have to be arbitrated by the Conservation Commission. So in other words, you would, it's a little bit like the Parks and Rec.
The downside would be the document that governs whatever you put in place, right?
Right.
So they say the Conservation Commission or the town would control via the document.
I don't think the town can lose control because the town owns the property. So the
It's
Conservation.
similar to the nature center, and then the town owns the property, owns the nature center property. And,
Ooh, I like what you're saying now,
yeah,
how that agreement works.
yes, yes. Which Tiger, I don't think that, at one point, there was some lawyer that came on board that wanted an agreement between the town and the nature center, and it never quite got implemented or executed or whatever, but it is exactly the same thing, a nonprofit park or and preschool that is partnered or owned by the town.
We have an agreement with the Nature Center, it's just from the 1960s.
Yeah.
We wanted it updated.
It's one page.
Yeah.
And it also, it's not actually, we don't. It's not administered the same way that that one page is, but that's another topic.
So we have some experience with that, with dealing with these public-private partnerships. Your question of downside is a good one, and I think the downside would be covered by the opt-out clause that would be in the agreement, which is the Conservation Commission or the town wishes to opt out. It's an opt-out. It works because it works together, if that's falling apart, then there's the opt-out,
Right.
and somebody that gets it out.
Yeah, that could be, well, if the town owns the land, it's, yeah,
It-
the opt-out would only be the
Right.
nonprofit. that
Right.
would be wanting to go for pipe, and then they.
Well, money doesn't count, so. I think it's hard to say there won't be any challenges in something like that, but there is an advantage, which is an organization that's going to act in perpetuity becomes a relationship with that property and learns or shares or does work in that. It also allows the Friends of Bristow to demise, which is really the other aspect, which is going to do because it's there for just the centennial cycle. Any other questions regarding that? I don't have anything real other than those discussions that started. John, have you got any good pictures of deer on your remote camera? That's good.
That is good.
Okay. And then on 1.E, simply the pavilion and bird blinds are, pavilion is almost complete, the bird blind is complete. So from a structural standpoint, we're nearly done. There's just some work to do to improve the pathway up to the first overlook that looks out over the meadow. It's very kind of rewarding when you get this far down the line
Yeah.
to see certain things come in, so we're making progress. Any other questions or comments regarding Bristow? Susan, you okay?
I'm good, thank you.
Just one question around, bike access. If you wanted to go to the park, you know, from either entrance by bike, if there was any accommodation. Or, you mentioned the sidewalk, so it sounds like you're already talking about, pedestrian access for people, you know, with baby carriage walking.
Yes.
But some, you know, wheels, if there's. That bus is coming in, just wondering whether thinking about bikes.
We haven't thought about it, like, to be honest with you, there's a lot of fence line that could actually lock to, riding in the park would be, you know, it would be difficult. We wouldn't want that in.
Right.
I don't think you would either, that's, you know, that's why we haven't really, you know, granted access to, there is, you know, part of the pull-off plan, it's actually started as a sidewalk to, and then we said, well, let's accommodate, you know, let's take care of the parking as well in the entire plan. The sidewalk comes from Park Street and around the corner to the park itself. We can certainly look at it, and, you know, I think we can probably put it in either spot, because Mead Park, we don't necessarily have any cycling, any bike racks either, you know, which is you know, another aspect. I don't see too many people riding there, but, you know, it's one of those things that we can certainly look up and see if we can start.
Yeah, I'm just speaking from a perspective of kids who want
No,
to
it's fine.
ride in town.
I read everywhere in my town, so I, you know, it is what it is, but, you know, most of the time we just lock it to someplace that's adjacent, you know, but we can certainly look and see if we can accommodate. That there's room, let's put it that way, there's definitely room, yeah, Mike was.
Like if we laid out a bike pull off at that site. I'm glad you brought that up, because there was a problem with bikes in Bristol Park itself. And it wasn't so much, you know, I'm not sure I have a problem with somebody riding on the main Greenlink Trail, connecting from Mead Park back out.
Right.
The old Stanford Road. The problem we ran into were kids, and I think it was during the week off of school, were dirt biking
Yeah.
on the sides of the hills, and it's sort of like it's hard on the ground, but it was really hard on all the gravel. So we had laid out all these beautiful paths, and then they were very heavily rutted, and you know, you come down a hill for full speed, you hit the brakes, you know, you throw rocks all over the place. So we put up a couple temporary signs of, you know, dirt bikes, main trail only, no side trails.
Dirt bike, we mean, like an outline.
Not, I don't know. To me, it had to be mountain bikes. I doubt it was motorized. That would really gotten people's attention.
We would have calls if it was motorized, we would have.
Yeah.
Pardon me?
We would have a call who's motorized, cyclists, you know, mountain bikers, we're not necessarily gonna get a call.
You're right. But yeah, that's right. So anyway, that is a comment, but I do think that in the kind of like complete streets, green links,
Yeah.
that bike paths and walking paths are all of a nature. And being a Dutchman, where you either are on a bike or walking, I believe in both those. And I do like the idea of families riding there, you know, enjoying, you know, putting the park down, putting their bikes down, walking in the park and then riding out. Whatever brings you in works. And we've always designed it, we've always planned on designing, which would be senior and stroller friendly. It's not, we've never been able to say, we can make the park what is it? ADA compliant, but we were always working to make it more friendly in that regard, which is why the Mead Park path idea is still in flow. But thank you for that point. I'm moving to 0.5, unless anyone has anything else they want to add to that. On 0.5, and you'll see it attached to the back of your agenda. There was a group convened via the library to talk about conservation and environmental issues or ideas for New Canaan. And in that session, it was brought up that if this group, which was exactly the group we were talking about at one point. How do you get the garden club, the nature center, the beautification league, the Waverly Park Conservancy, all the groups that are conservation or beauty focused, to look at what the town wants to do for the next 10 years and influence it. So the agreement was that this group, this meeting of leaders, would start with a review of the 2014 Plan of Conservation and Development to evaluate it against their perspectives. And then that would start the basis of discussion for what might make sense or additional sense for the 2024 Plan of Conservation and Development. So I have that, and I would love for as many or any members of the Conservation Commission to attend on April 25th, because you also hear what the other groups are
Yeah,
saying.
I spoke to Nikki
Yes.
about this, and she agreed that this would be a good forum for, you know, ordinance creation for gas leak blowers.
There's an example of what could happen.
Because that's what I've been asked, I proposed in that
Yeah. So
strategy, that there be an advocacy group for conservation.
Right. so you have that issue, the swap, the Planet New Canaan was talking about reducing the recycling or transit burden of things. So there's a number of, and again, I love the fact that we can get more grassroots instead of us trying to direct it to bring them in. So the Land Trust would participate as well, Nature Center, all the different groups.
Do you know when that's gonna be?
It says April 25th, 11 to 12 p.m. in the McLaughlin Conference Room. And what a nice.
Yes.
It's set up by Lisa Ullman, and I'm trying to remember who on her team, whether it's Mickey, it might be Mickey Boylan, who is the kind of moderator
Yes,
of this.
and she works at the library.
She worked at the library, right? And I love that. What a great tribute to Marty McLaughlin. That it's
Yeah,
in-
isn't that
it's in
nice?
McLaughlin.
We have to tell him.
I told him.
Oh, you told him.
Well, depending on numbers, I'd be happy.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a great opportunity to sit back and listen and bring ideas out and see where the engagement is. And I mean, your list of ideas of things that we could potentially discuss would be fantastic in that environment. A framework. that If we do it well. We can influence.
I already see a lot of overlap with the priorities that are.
Right, and we can move up or down.
I guess I just.
It was on the last two pages of the exam.
I
So
just-
when you pick it up.
The April
No, I
25th
just printed
meeting.
it.
Is it public or is it just?
It's an invitational meeting, but it's open to, you know, what I expect will happen is, if the president of the garden club can't attend, they'll designate somebody else to come. Or more members will come, but it's not meant to be a closed meeting, it's meant to be a citizens.
No, this is perfect.
Citizens, working group.
This is perfect. I love this.
Good. That's great news, guys.
Yeah, that's great.
So that was, you know, we've been looking for a vehicle, right, convenient for a thing to it, and now I'm in vitro, so we're in a moderating position as opposed to the leading position, which I think what we should.
That
do.
is definitely more where we should be.
Kudos to them. Second enough.
Great, and then we're on the next point on the open space in the 2023-24 budget capital plan. $100,000 is now scheduled. It needs to make it through the process. That's there. The first selectman and the Conservation Commission have put that number forward. It will go through the fine tooth comb of where are we going, what are we trying to accomplish. But I'm hopeful that through this POCD process, we can eventually move towards a system where a few basis points of the conveyance fee becomes a vehicle for funding the open space, which is we've discussed before.
Right.
So that's that. I think you're all aware that we've submitted a $26,000 operating budget for the upcoming year. It's diminuous, but It will allow us to continue to support, which is coming up, the Silver Accreditation for Sustainable Connecticut, our river testing. If the numbers, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to adjust. And then we also have support for the Plan of Conservation Development, open space mapping, detailing where are all the opportunities and highlighting which ones disappeared in the last 10 years and what's still remaining.
Right.
And Tiger's already brought to our attention the DOT piece of land that runs along River Street in 123, which is sort of like I don't want to call it abandoned, but it's sort of like a no man's land.
Right.
And it used to be pretty, it used to be nice. It also has a historic feature, which is it has the remains of an old mill. The stone wall of an old mill is in there. And so there's this discussion of what's possible with DOT to do something to make that a more attractive and a better, it's a beautiful stream, right? It's 5 Mile River,
Right.
running down there.
Yeah.
So there are these ideas that are generating opportunities for improving our or appreciating these open spaces. So good news there. And then lastly, on this one, a $12,000 line item that had been in our budget was transferred to the Parks Department, and that's earmarked for maintenance type issues of a variety that may not fall under the normal things, which is we need a little bit of mowing and blowing, but it might be tree work, or just in case there's a call for it, that the funds are there. So it's wonderful because it's the first time Bristol has a specific line item for it. We needed it. It's here. And I think Tiger made the great argument, which is, guys, we just spent almost $500,000 in town money, a couple $100,000 of Friends of Bristol money, and we're not planning to we need to put money in against maintenance. Otherwise, we end up in 10 years where we were when we started this process. So thank you.
That's perfect, because that was set aside, whereas before they were all amalgamated, right, they're all combined. It's combined, then it competes,
Right.
Yeah.
when it's set aside by itself, there's no competition, it's set aside for that.
And it may be that we don't need it and it can be used elsewhere, but if it's there, we have that opportunity. I'd like to give Ann a chance to talk a little bit about some of the ideas that she thinks that we could work on together. And I think it's also part of a way for us to think about projecting ideas out into the community, things that we care about. As a conservation. Or, so please.
Sure, this is sort of a brainstorming list that I sent to Chris, just in an effort to find areas where I can contribute to the work of the commission. I'm coming late to, sounds like Bristow has been 10 years in. But, we'll throw some of these things out and you can let me know what sounds interesting. I think, one of the first things that I noticed was just in communication with the public. Is there, coming from the field of journalism, can I be helpful in, creating a plan for our social media where we can, communicate best practices, resources, successes, from the commission, any kind of news. The Land Trust does a really nice job with their social media.
Right.
I know they have interns and people who do that, but anything around, for example, in the list here, there were a few things where there was overlap with what I was interested in. So residential, management of your own backyard, landscape best practices, landscape architecture best practices. What is the town promoting around conservation for residents of New Canaan, and also dark sky compliance. I don't know if that's something that
An interesting one.
we've been involved in.
Or dark nights or yellow lights or things like that.
Yeah, it has come. I've
Mhm.
seen some reporting on it in the past, but it seems with the new builds in town. And there's an increase in the lighting, it seems, on any new development or builds, and I just wonder whether people are aware.
I think it's a great topic, and I can tell you specifically that the land trust has a firefly sanctuary. And we work incredibly hard to get poor neighbors to turn off the Klieg lights.
Yeah.
Because it disorients the fireflies completely during that 2-week period. But then there's also the migratory cycle where the lighting causes effect, and then there's the year-round lighting, which, basically attracts insects, kills them before the birds and the bees and everybody can, get any nutrition.
And the night birds have difficulty,
Pardon?
not the birds of the night.
Yeah, the migratory cycle is a challenge. So I think it's an interesting topic, and it's either something we can tell a story about or invite a speaker on. And I guess, Tiger has a platform, which is the DPW. I don't know who's running that for you. Is it Christie or you? Who does the DPW Instagram?
I do Instagram and Twitter.
You're the Instagram.
Instagram and Twitter, yeah, on our account, yeah.
Okay.
We don't have Facebook on, so we found Facebook, it's like, we can't, I wouldn't be able to sustain and maintain it, but our Twitter account, Instagram account, I run.
Oh, they're linked, and you can just post.
I
it.
post to Twitter, and then I post to Instagram, and then it gets thrown over to the town side, and ends up handling the town
And
side.
then it gets picked up and
Yes.
rebroadcast.
Yeah, and Michael Dinan has an automatic retweet,
So
so
you can pick it up.
he picks it up right away, yeah. So I assume that, yeah.
Well, that's you're looking at an interesting challenge, which is, as far as I can remember, 50 years ago, something would be published in the newspaper, and that's how everybody got it. Then about 20 years ago, it started to be by phone, and they got smarter systems that everybody got a call update on COVID or whatever. But there's new ways to communicate, and the Conservation Commission of the town hasn't moved towards a phone, Twitter, or or an email newsletter townwide, to my knowledge.
Well, he's working on we are working on an email for every household.
Right.
And trying to get an email, that's mostly for emergency management.
Right.
So it's saying on that regard, but it could be, you could
You could
theoretically.
have an opt-in, opt-out for updates on traffic or DPW issues or.
I want to use it for that, that's, I want to, if, whatever I use in a neighborhood, I want to be able to tell the neighbors, this is what we're gonna be doing of that time, because right now, my only avenue is to either put it out there on the town website or elsewhere, or send a letter, which is.
Yeah, not efficient.
No, it's archaic, it takes too long for what we're doing, but as part of our emergency management, that's what Kevin's been working on that since he started here,
Mhm.
trying to get one email address, one valid email address per residence, so we can contact everybody in one shot. But the newsletter is interesting, because other towns do,
Mhm.
yeah, and it seemed to be.
The Conservation Commission used to have it, but they had very low leadership.
Right, yeah, it just didn't have the address.
Yeah.
site.
Right.
So we tried one thing, which was we took the insert, sent it to the various organizations, so that the Land Trust or the Beautification League or the Planet New Canaan embedded it into their newsletter, and it was, you scroll down and here's the message from the Conservation Commission. We still have that venue to send messages out on, but eventually there's got to be a way to communicate,
Yeah.
whether it's, and it's like you said, you're in the news business. How do we send these messages out? That's a maintain an advertiser, Instagram, Twitter.
Well, I think for a lot of people in town, it's the Facebook Canaan Moms group,
There you
which
go.
is, that group is really fast. They're fast communicators. So, I
And
don't know.
that has to be added, but not everybody can be in there.
I
don't let everybody.
I've heard from a few people, the
Right,
Knicks off the,
yeah.
yeah.
You get kicked off or you can't join, so
No.
that's not the only one.
Well, I'm just saying that there are
Yeah, but
online groups.
what you're saying, there are these groups, yeah, I've been doing this long enough, it's very hard to get to all 7,500
Right.
households.
Yeah.
But if you could get to 2,000, that's a big step up, because we're not there yet. We're not.
Ever multiple platforms you can reach is how you should do it. You were in the journalism business, I was in the media placement business, so
So if we have messages,
one avenue, one media placement, I'm gonna do it. Even 25,000.
if we have messages that are not going to be like sufficient fill a periodic newsletter, which is kind of where we are right now, I think, right?
We had one message a month.
Maybe max, right? One message a month. What's the best way do you think to get that out? So,
Social media,
right,
I mean, because that's a blast that, you know.
as long as people are subscribed to us, you
Yeah.
know. that-
Yeah, although, I like the idea, if there is a, like, town newsletter that's not just conservation commission focused, if it's, the gathering place for all kinds of information.
So, yeah, we have a communications meeting every Monday at 11 o'clock where we go through what's on the town website. And then what should be a press release, what would be a social media post, what would go to Facebook. So we kind of sit in the room together and figure it out as to what, what should sit where. So if you have things, you can just bring it up, because I bring things up of a DPW nature or, an infrastructure nature, things like that. And then others bring, bring John House in there for recreation. And then we've got others that bring in other information as well. And then we just determine there's 5 to 6 spots on the town website where we can have the news media and right there. It comes up and those change, weekly or what have you. And then if it's not that and it's a press release, then it's press release worthy. We'll direct Mimi Pitt will direct the press release and we'll send it to the news organizations, or if it's for social media, it'll go to Enza and she'll take care of posting it all on our 3 accounts. So if you have things, just send it to us and I'll certainly bring it up of that week. There you go. Especially if it's timely, then it's almost better because it's like, okay, let's get it out,
That'd be great.
So there's an avenue.
Yeah. I mean, working machine.
And I think that, these things, these messages, you get them, you like it, you send it to a friend, you have the whole, that kind of neural network is
Right.
possible.
Mhm.
So then let's keep talking about potential topics. That's the other side of it is, we brought up dark skies.
There's just a meeting.
Oh,
Hello,
sorry.
John.
Hi, Joe.
So we talked about gas.
Oh, sorry, I thought I was on mute.
What did you say?
He put himself on mute. It's okay. John, we know John.
Yeah.
Other topics.
Right, well, around communication, residential yard management, we talked
Yeah,
about
that
landscapers,
would be
landscape architects. I also was wondering if we might consider, sort of a speaker series, to not just, blasting information out at people, but creating conversation. Aspetuck Land Trust does a really nice job with this. I attend their webinars and they do sort of I just signed up for one about rewilding your yard. I went to their Doug Talamy talk. Actually, that may have been their beautification week, but so that it's like a learning conversation, and it could be in person, it could be a webinar, but kind of bringing people together, sort of like this meeting on April 25th, but for the public, where you can maybe hear from someone prominent in the conservation community outside of New Canaan. We invite a speaker in or a panel in, and we create an event.
I think that that's a great idea, but I would suggest this, there's 2 ways to play it. One is we host and sponsor it, or Planet New Canaan, Beautification League, Garden Club, Land Trust are constantly calling the speakers. We help co-host.
Yeah.
They say, but we need, a lot of these honorariums are $250 or whatever, and they say, well, could you co-host and give us $50?
Because we don't have
And-
necessarily have a budget.
Right,
But
we don't.
these other entities do.
Right, and so we can support them, they can say Conservation Commission, so we get in on that, and the idea gets promoted, and then maybe from that, we build a story and it comes out.
Mhm.
So,
But this group would be,
this group is the,
great, because
the-
the library would be the place to do it.
but I think that the Conservation Commission can support these things, and the tremendous leverage of, if it's a $250 honorarium and they can't, they're trying to figure out how to balance it, we say, we'll give you 50, we can do 100, whatever is needed, there is a little bit of funding. And we might say, well, we can't go above 1,000 in the course of a year, but we can then be supportive, and that's what they're looking for. Which is
What do people think about simply promoting the Aspetuck Land Tracks? Talk on bringing your.
We could, yeah, I'm
Maybe
pretty.
it's-
The talk is-
I'm sure you could do a hybrid.
I mean, I think that's a good idea. We should
Yeah,
be
that's-
coordinating with the, surrounding communities,
Yeah.
their efforts.
Mhm.
I certainly enjoy it and learn from their stuff.
Yeah.
I
I
do.
just made a mental note to join that.
Yeah. Yeah, and they also have this great plant sale that they do every year, and they bring in native pollinators, and they have this like a big drive for people to yeah,
And to be fair, if we work with this environment and conservation group, it may be that says Planet New Canaan, Beautification League, the Nature Center, and the Land Trust combining
mhm,
to create a native plant sale.
yeah,
And I would bring great ideas in as well. So,
yeah.
And on Earth Day, they attempted to do that. They did have a plant sale at native. On Earth Day.
And we need scale to get that information out in sports.
Yeah.
You have a jump off, don't you? So what about this?
Yeah, I gotta go to a couple like now.
I tried to, I think I got in here, help on my thing for you, so thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, I'm sorry, I gotta jump.
No.
Right.
Fly again while you're in.
I appreciate it.
You're better like in your office back.
My house is really comfortable. All right, thanks.
So,
Keep going.
we've been talking about oaks, and, I don't know if we've tried to, create, sort of plant a tree event where we coordinate with some of the nurseries in town. Copia, or one of these great nurseries, Copia, that,
Oh, yeah, they're wonderful.
they're wonderful.
Yeah.
Jen and Peter, they're so much knowledge, they're
Mhm.
Cornell graduates from their agricultural school,
Right.
and I just wonder, whether, we could partner with a nursery to create like a plant a tree event.
Yeah.
Especially around oaks, which has been so much conversation around.
Mhm.
So that's a thought. Also, in the list is, I haven't heard any discussion of this in the commission, so, I don't know how it works, but I've been attending P and Z meetings online, and, those are high attendance events because they've got all these controversial
Right.
matters to consider. But I just wonder whether the Conservation Commission could, with them more closely during their approvals process to kind of, I don't know, make recommendations, make requests, and every time there's, there are a lot of active builders in this town.
Yeah.
And, that seems like an opportunity to have an impact. And I know that the P and Z Commission, they do have conservation in mind. You hear it in all of their questions.
Yeah.
It seems like a natural place where we could be part of the conversation of land development.
And I like that idea. One is this first review of the plan of conservation development, putting it into the POCD is one. But I'm with you, which is, how would we have a moment, and again, they're so busy, they're so tied up, but to have a moment to say, is there a way to encourage developers not to clear every tree?
Yes,
on a lot?
totally.
Is there a chance to explain to developers that the fabric of New Canaan is dry stone walls
Yes.
as opposed to,
Right. Right.
template
Yeah.
Yeah.
kind of things? Is there a chance to discuss when development is done, to not really say go flat out lawn, but maybe keep some wild, keep some,
Yeah.
balancing
Mhm.
things. I don't know what the errors, I've stood before them and brought forth things to their attention. But when they're dealing with the issues they're dealing with, it's sort of out there. But there is an opportunity at some point to have a discussion, not only with planning and zoning, but inland wetlands is another group that deals with restoration work or people adjusting their property or dealing with wetlands. That's an important part of our town, and our wetlands and our rivers and streams.
Right.
Um,
Once a developer gets that approval, there's no,
There-
There's nothing about it, no.
Right.
so there's like this sweet spot of when they're trying to get the town to approve something.
I used to think that you could call the tree warden. But that's not anymore. There was in property next door, there were 13 mature, beautiful trees taken out for absolutely no reason except that the developer wanted to flatten the land.
Mhm.
And it didn't even need to be flattened. It was just barely graded.
That's a
But
tough,
there was no one, you know.
that's a tough one. You know, I'm a tree hugger. And I don't deny it, but in some cases I had to cut through some, but then I figured out a way to reuse them. But I think we need to think about, when people are asking for a special request, that one of the conditions could be, the maintenance of trees over 6-inch diameter. Or some kind of guideline about, if you're looking at stone, if you're thinking of putting this, when they're saying this, there's this negotiation of, I need to get an extra permission for an extra 500 square feet of coverage. Well, when you're doing your stone wall, can you look at it being a dry stone wall instead of whatever? And I don't know what the degrees are. There's a opportunity for discussion there. And you do pick a forum. The issue is the forum is now 95% development B&Z. Very little conservation in that forum. And its question is how do we bend that curve, or bend that move?
Yeah, I think there, when you listen to the meetings, they are definitely, conservation is a priority for them, clearly. And I think, around asphalt and this move away from, parking and asphalt dominating the development, there's certainly a sensitivity there. But I think if we were part of the conversation.
Could really support that whole conversation, that whole topic, absolutely. It's a great, I'm struggling to think of how, like what the next step is for that, but it's absolutely a huge
Well,
opportunity.
the first thing would be to get on the agenda and have some proposals of how you could start approaching planning and zoning with sustainability in mind.
Mhm. Maybe the angle is to identify those planning and zoning members who are in the conservation zones. I suspect we may have an avenue, which is if P&Z, which leads the POCD process, starts to allocate its resources, they're going to say, well, we need a couple people on conservation, a couple people on affordable housing, a couple people on overlay, a couple people in general commercial. If there are some conservation people, that may be our avenue to start influencing in, sharing our ideas of what we've seen in our experience, in our long experience in this town, as to what we think could make this town more beautiful, more attractive, more resilient,
Yeah.
more environmentally friendly, and a place where we all love to live.
Yeah.
So
And we.
you're right, the idea is there is the avenue in that we have to figure out.
Yeah, the opportunity to weigh in on specific developments, would be,
Or to influence people who would weigh in. In other words, we would be able to be in a position to say, somebody on the P&Z would say, it has been brought to my attention by the Conservation Commission that this property has quite a few attractive features. What are you doing to protect it? That way, it's not them, it's they're intermediating. That's always an advantage.
right,
When you say there's a concerned citizenship.
right.
Susan, do
I-
you want to? say something?
I do. I have one comment on this last issue, only because I know a little bit about this personally, but also professionally. The Planning and Zoning Commission is totally dictated mostly in their approval process or whatever by a lot of regulations. And very few of them are respectful of what you're talking about because you're dealing primarily with private property owners. I just sold a property. Every single tree on that property was cut down. Planning and zoning would have had nothing to say about it. because it's not in their purview. And if they had resisted that, they probably would have been sued.
Yeah.
And so I think you have to be respectful of the fact that their review process is very regulated, very, very, very constricted by their own regulations. And what we're talking about are issues that are sensitive to private property owners, and private property owners are going to do whatever they want to do. And to the development community of which you spoke, Annie, of which I'm very respectful, those are such the minority applications that come into P and Z. I mean, every once in a while, yes, you're right. The application comes in, they need a special permit, blah, blah, and you have a little leverage there. Most of the time, not. They abide by the wetland restrictions, they abide by the sort of those sorts of restrictions that are very conscripted, so there's not a legal issue there. But 90% of the time, there's nothing there that says you cannot chop down a tree on your property.
I agree. And it's very difficult to want to put regulations in, but what we have to do is try to figure out a way if we can influence that. In other words, have the issues raised. Because what people who are trying to get their permits are trying to figure out, how do I overcome objections? And sometimes, there's an objection, but it's balanced out by a good guy, a bad guy.
No, you're right. You're right. They are negotiated settlements. You're absolutely right. I have an issue here. I need to get a waiver. I need to get a something or another. So I need to give something back in order to get what I want. You're totally right, but that's not all the time.
Right.
And so I just don't think to say that clean cutting a property, how many times have we seen it? I've seen it bunches of times in my neighborhood. I saw it with my own property. I mean, 100-year-old trees were just cut down because they're in the way.
And I
But,
think,
but the town cannot do anything about that.
well, I think what we need to figure out is it's what can we do to potentially influence that? And without saying we gotta write ordinances on tree cutting or an ordinance on stone wall maintenance, but instead try to influence the direction of where things are and influence the questioning that comes up, because it's the same developers keep coming back year after year after year for projects, and then they need to be told, it would be nicer if on that 2-acre lot, you left a perimeter of trees as opposed to clearing it. What is, where are we going with this? So it is hard, Susan, but I don't want to say it's impossible. I think there's a chance to make some small movement. We would never be able to correct it. And there are always going to be people who says, I bought it, I own it, it's mine, I'll do what I want. There you go. But maybe we sensitize not just the developers, but we sensitize the people who are paying the developers in their project. And we sensitize them to say, I don't know how many spec houses are being built, but if it's custom, you have a chance to influence how the property is shaped. So we need to think about that. And most of the building now is redevelopment. So in that regard, there are opportunities to influence it if it is other than a spec house. If it's a contracted job, there's a chance. So that's about getting the message out and say, look, you moved here because it's a beautiful town with beautiful trees. Why is it that you moved here and you say it's beautiful trees, but not on my property? You know what I mean?
Right.
Or not on my street, even worse.
I take your point, Susan. I think the idea was around being a voice in the conversation, which I'm not sure that we are right now.
No, I agree. And therefore we should try to find out where our bully pulpit is to kind of advocate for things. We're in an advocacy organization. So.
I just did a little Google search of the American Society of Consulting Arborists about tree ordinances. And there are different states and different ordinances about how you can protect certain trees. So that's where it's looking at. We might put together a little presentation and what might be possible, like if somebody had a $10,000 Japanese maple in the front of their house, you know, would, can an arborist go in and say that this is historically protected, or are there some historically protected trees around woodland properties?
I mean, that's an
anyway.
avenue of exploration that
Yeah.
could be something that could be, you know, and again, we can start to introduce some ideas into the plan of conservation and development that could then be used as basis to say, we want to flesh this out. Right, and or the basis with which some neighbor could go to a P and Z to say, you know, it's in our plan to protect. Why is this property,
Right.
why not influence that? So we're looking for mechanisms here based on the fact that we've lived here and we've studied the processes. And it's true, it's gonna be hard, but, you know, if we can, if we can save 100 trees in the course of 5 years, we're making progress.
I agree. And there are
It's
also,
a good idea.
thanks, there are, you know, like there's a federal counterpart to what we're doing. That they're coming out with recommendations that are aligned with what we would be asking for. So on a national level, things are moving, you know, in development, things are moving towards conservation. I think we might be able to pull some, you know,
Some ideas and some storylines out there.
yeah,
And, you know, if we are thinking this, there are other people out there, we just bring these ideas out and they start to nod their head and say, you know, that makes sense. I get it.
mhm.
Oak trees are great. You know, how many oak trees are you gonna take out?
I think also there is the possibility of deed restrictions on trees. I have seen this before on different properties that I have protected my $400 whatever, I mean, not 400-year-old oak,
So that-
and it has a deed restriction on it. So you purchase my property, of course, now my property is less valuable because to the new owner, I have a deed restriction on this tree.
But you accept that,
Yes, you have to accept that.
right? It's a little bit like giving an easement or giving anything else. It's
That's
like-
exactly right.
Interesting, and that, I mean, that's a creative idea of how we could say, look, you may not be able to influence other people, but you can influence your own property.
Mhm,
Mhm.
So as a mechanism.
mhm.
Keep going.
I'm interested in making the town more bike friendly. And, you know, right now it really is not. I know there are other people working towards this,
Mhm.
and I'm not sure if the town has plans to make it more bike friendly, but there was construction on so many roads this summer. And I just was praying that there'd be a few bike lanes. I even wrote a few emails to Tiger.
Right.
But I'm not sure that this is anywhere in their priorities.
So, and again, I'm glad you bring this up. There is a concept.
I'm gonna quickly interrupt because I have to leave. Annie, thank you very much for your comments.
Got it. We'll be in touch.
Okay.
Take care. There is a concept called complete streets, where it takes into account pedestrian, bicycle, automotive thinking.
Mhm.
And it is a concept that the plan of conservation and development can start to look at and develop. And it turns out that Fairfield has done a complete streets
Hmm.
plan,
Mhm.
so that it's happening in other areas. And in an era where you're starting to see more electric cars, but now you have electric bikes, which for me works because I'm happy riding downhill, but riding back uphill, riding back up Ferris Hill
Yeah.
is a hard piece of work. So, but if I would do it more, I would say
Green,
Yes.
so I think that there is, you know, and that's kind of like, there's a story there. If we tell the story, we can push it into different areas. So I can tell you 2 people to talk to, learn more about it, and then you can develop that.
Mhm.
And if it's something that you personally are interested in, it's a win.
Great, I'm definitely interested. I lived in an area for a while where every Sunday, I think, between like morning hours, they would shut down a huge loop. And people would come out riding with their kids, everyone would come out, scooters, everyone on wheels was safe. Cars, just for this one chunk of time.
How large is the loop?
Pardon me?
How large is the loop?
It was pretty big. And it went through some natural areas
Right.
too. So that created a lot of excitement around.
Because there are certainly areas that are, ripe for more biking. I mean, there are a lot of areas in town here that are not, right? I mean,
It's
that's
really
the,
very-
that's the, that's.
It's very dangerous on some of these.
Right, right.
Yeah.
But,
I'm thinking more of the hill than.
I think you take your life.
It's right, there's a lot of kids don't even learn how to.
Right, you don't see kids on because their parents don't let them ride on these dangerous streets. Conus, people drive 50
Yeah.
miles an hour.
on weed streets. And
Yeah,
and interestingly enough, even with all that, there's still people walking down the streets. You still see people walking. And so if they're walking, it's just as dangerous, maybe it's a little less dangerous because if you pick up more. But I believe you're into a good idea on complete streets.
Clear.
Walkability and bikeability. What are we doing?
And you do have plenty of people still like adult bike groups on the weekends. They do
yeah,
around that.
on the-
So that's a different,
See,
Yeah.
that's maybe almost different than.
Yeah, I-
you're suggesting,
when
but
I
it's
went
it's
down,
not, it is
I-
doable.
You would do it on the weekends, not during the.
And maybe there is a section of town that would be great, like the Valley Road is a great run. It's
Yeah.
not the heaviest travel, there's long sight lines.
Yeah,
And then it's just a question of where would the turnarounds be? Where would the loop go? I think that there's a lot in that and telling the story and introducing it is a great way to bring more awareness to this, to the idea.
Okay, great. I have one more for you guys to consider. I'm really interested in zero waste options for families, grocery shopping. And I noticed, speaking of Fairfield, they have a grocery store there called BP Provisions, which is a zero waste grocery store. It's all like bulk food, basically. And, I wonder if, I wish there, we have the farmers market. That's the only zero.
Close to zero.
Yeah, so, and I wonder if there's a way of attracting, that kind of BP provisions to town.
Say again, what?
It's called
provision?
BP provisions.
like British Petroleum.
BP,
Yeah.
meaning, what does BP mean? then?
I'll send you. a
So
link.
the,
Well, Planet Buchanan,
well, the sustainability committee.
Sustainability Committee,
Yeah, Robin already is pretty, you need to talk to Robin because she's got already has this plan to bring in different organizations to reduce waste from restaurants, to take the food and be sure that it's repurposed, not repurposed. I'm not sure what the word is, but, so you need to talk to her.
Maybe this
It's
meeting.
Yeah,
Slightly different concept though.
but it's within that one and there
but
are-
it's within, she's trying to get all the organizations that deal with food and food waste together. To create a program to reduce it.
so that it doesn't end up in the waste stream,
Right.
it ends up in the recycle stream. And I
Or
think-
or accordingly to the food pantries or whatever, wherever that. it may be.
I think Andy suggested more on the procurement side, on the offering side, that there's a gap in terms of what's available easily in town.
You cannot go grocery shopping for your family
Yeah.
without buying tons of plastic.
Yeah, exactly,
And waste.
exactly.
It's impossible.
That's a hard, how do we figure this out? Yeah, it may not be easy, but.
But it isn't an option.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, but you should talk to Robin because she's got all these concepts. I think, first the containers and the food that prepared foods put in, how to recycle those. And I'm sure you know about the black
Black.
black containers, and now you can have to take those to the
There's special bin.
special bins at the.
This is a great avenue to explore as
Right,
well. I
right,
mean, the
right.
truth is there's a topic list going like this, and you want
Right,
to just start to get deeper on
Right.
them. Robin Bates Mason would be very helpful. The Sustainable CT crew could, and I think this would work within sustainable, for accreditation purposes by
Totally.
getting certain stories out. So, excellent.
it's just a matter of what the commission is most interested in, what our priorities are, and what we think has the best chance of success.
And I think that's good thinking, but I also think we should try it anyway. And we can say, we got the story out, we built something up. okay, look, what's the next idea that we can do, see how things build?
So that resonates.
Yeah. So I'd be thrilled to see any of these things, if you wanna ping each of us individually and say, well, how do you like the list, which one do you think we should start with? Starting with, this is what I would do, this is what I like, and then we can kind of chime in and say, well, if we like this one, then we'll help you with that, or that's like this one.
That's a good point. Whatever will give you the most energy.
Yeah, but
But we're also right in the middle of this ghastly floor, and I'm getting all sorts of
right, so the,
comments, and I only have so much, time.
I know, but we have to work together and say, how do we build this story into the next round? That's always,
I'm sorry, we started this last year, we took it on as a priority and passed a resolution. And we have proposals before the ordinance committee. And now we have to follow up, and I don't, it's in our lap now, because the ordinance committee is,
the ordinance committee said, we're not hearing a lot of public. We're hearing from a few people, but we're not hearing from the general public, what the feeling is about this. So if we do a little bit of awareness work on the challenges and the dilemmas of gas leak blowers, and we start submitting that, we did one piece, which was we submitted that insert quiet neighborhoods. But
right,
now we have to take it to a next level to kind of figure out, and maybe that's exactly where your skill set up. What's the issue? How do I tell this story effectively?
And I
How do I
think-
make an example, make it real?
and it does have to go to this because it involves all the green partners of,
Yep.
the community.
Right, they could make it in there. If that is where you want to go, I'd like to move to a short executive session. For us, it'll be a 5-minute discussion. As a conservation commission on a topic that's confidential. So I think, if there's anybody listening, is there a participant?
Well,
It's John.
Yes, but I'll drop off.
All right,
Okay,
John, thank
yes,
you
but
so
I
much. Take care.
very interested in that discussion of the leaf blowers.
Leaf blowers.
John, did you want to
Yeah.
make something?
No, I just would love to see a presentation and something to increase awareness. I think we're kind of in a catch-22 now, where there isn't a public interest in it because there hasn't been any very much publicity about it. And so it would be great to get out of that catch-22. But I'll leave it with that. Thank you.
Thanks, John. There's someone we could bring into the conversation. So,
So before you do that, we should just put the meeting.
meeting
Yeah.
is now closed. Thank you all for listening. Have a great spring.
So we're just